Thank you, David. And we're going to move on. I think Elaine is here, Elaine Walker, a composer who's been experimenting with microtonal music for quite a while.
Hello.
Hi, how you doing, Elaine?
I'm pretty good.
Oh, you
How are
got
you?
quite a collection behind you there.
Oh yeah, do you like my background?
Yeah, I'm not sure what I'm looking at. Are those
I
keyboards?
can, do you want me to tell you that first?
Sure.
Okay. So these are all of these are just M audio keyboards. And sometimes I get them and I gut them. So can you hear me okay?
Yes, perfect.
Okay. So the ones that look like this are vertical keyboards that you wear with a guitar strap like this.
Oh, wow.
And you play your left hand backwards and your right hand normal. And sorry, it's not plugged in. This particular one, this is the second one I ever made. The first one I ever made, I did in a Bowl and Pierce tuning, which looked like this one. And since the keys aren't just made to rearrange, as everyone knows, so I was like, I really want a keyboard to play at this Bowl and Pierce scale conference in Boston. It was the 2010 conference, the symposium, and I just thought, well, I can just chop the keys off and rearrange them. So I did that in a normal keyboard case, and of course it looked terrible because it was like this gaping hole. So I took it out of the case, rewired the back, so hid all the circuit boards under the back, and then put like a handle on it, and put a guitar strap on it. I'm like, wow, I literally did that, finished it like 3 days before the conference. So I had just like 3 days to learn this piece I had written in the early 90s or late 80s, early 90s. Stickman was like this long orchestral thing. So it was so nerve wracking, but we performed it live. And so it was literally the first time I had ever actually performed on it was during that symposium on stage in front of all these people. And the keyboard itself calmed me down because I'm like, I'm hugging the keyboard. This is amazing. It reminded me of playing cello. I used to play cello in the 70s. And I thought everyone's going to want one of these. So I made several of them, sold like a handful. But the problem is it took 1,000 hours of engineering, like 1,000 hours of labor. And then I just sold them for nothing, like basically parts. And then I've just been lending them out. So it's not really a business thing, but this is the vertical keyboard. And if you go to vertical keyboards, plural, verticalkeyboards.com, you can see a
I
bunch of
think
these.
you could have sold one of those to Edgar Winter back in the day. He would have killed to have something like
And of course it has
Frankenstein.
I can't see anything with these glasses. It has a vertical rocket. I
Mm,
call it the rocking out handle.
yeah.
Uh, and then let's see. So what's this? I think this is 17. Yeah, this is 17. I experimented with just making short keys, which I wouldn't bother with that really. And then what's this? This is 14. This is 15. This seems to be everyone's favorite. So I have these huge drawers full of spare M audio keys. I'm always out of G's and A's because everyone wants this. Or they just want the whole keyboard, every other key, white, black, white, black, white, black, which is hilarious to me because in elementary school, I took piano lessons. I took like hardcore piano lessons from this lady down the street. And my literal nightmare I would have at night was like every other key being white and black. Like right before a recital, I'd get so nervous. I'd sit down and it would just be black, white, black, white. So I'm like, why would anyone want this? But this is now, I think I don't want to say my favorite tuning, but let's say like my second or third favorite tuning is 15 because I don't know why I waited so long to try 15. I've been playing microtonal music since the late 80s. And I just like a couple of years ago discovered 15. Like everyone used to be all about 17 and I tried it. I'm like, oh, it sounds ugly to me. And then I finally like a year later, 2 years later, tried it and actually wrote a piece in 17. And I thought, this is great. Oh my God, I love 17 now. That's my new favorite. And then eventually discovered 16, which is harder. But when I do manage to write a song in 16, I feel like it's sparkly. I don't know. It's hard to explain. I just see it in my head. It's like sparkles. And then 15 is way easier. It's got so many possibilities. This, of course, is Bowl and Pierce. And then I should mention it before I forget. This is also Bowl and Pierce. Can you guys see this? It's wider keys. So I'm just finishing up a patent. I better finish it right away after this, of these key shapes. So these key shapes will eventually be normal width. Right now they're wider because I'm using a standard keyboard base. And in order to get these special 4 white key shapes instead of 7, you can interchange them however you want. In order to get them to actually fit on a regular keyboard base, they had to be wider. Long story. It's completely unintuitive. So it took me several years. It was literally like a math problem, like a geometry problem, to figure out what 4 key shapes can you use, or what key shapes can you use in general, where you can just rearrange them and have it like a standard piano, but be able to rearrange them in any order for any tuning. I haven't quite done the 2 black notes in a row thing yet, but if you want anything that doesn't have 2 black keys in a row and don't want any gaps and it looks perfect, that's what it's going to be. And so I spend a lot of my time now just doing real estate and investing just to try to get like, $100,000 or whatever it's going to take. Because I have to, now this engineer I'm working with is basically redoing the entire bass part of the keyboard. So the trick, which I'm giving away, is that it has to skip some keys in order to make it fit. So the software is going to sense when there's a key missing and then remap the notes. So that's that. For now, I call it the adjustable keyboard. I might call it the Zen keyboard. You guys can vote on what it's called. I don't really care. So yeah, I'm really, really interested in Georg's keyboards. Mainly the manufacturing. So it's funny, when everyone else was talking, I was taking 1,000 notes. Like, I feel like I was a student. So now I feel like I want to interview everyone else and ask them all these questions. But one, if David just wants to mention real quick, how many of those keys are wooden, and are they molding, plastic molding? What are the actual keys in the 31 keyboard?
The keys themselves are 3D printed, like a biodegradable. How do you say it? Kunststoff. It's a plastic kind of thing. And on the one,
it looks so smooth.
And
Wow.
on the one that has strings, it has like a metal skeleton, and which the key is set on. And the MIDI controllers are like just a plastic keys 3D printed and sanded with like I don't know, weights and springs and stuff attached.
All the keys are 3D printed.
Yeah.
I'll
Georg
give
prints
you later what material this is, because
Yeah, Georg prints them all himself.
failed experiences with that. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it takes hundreds of
I'm
years
just
to sand
completely
them.
enthralled with that keyboard, like the engineering of it. I'm like, how? I've been trying for so long, but I finally
Come
found
to
an
Vienna.
engineer. What's that?
Come to Vienna and look at them
Oh
yourself.
God, I wish.
and,
Yeah.
and bring some of yours so we can look at them.
As soon as I can travel, I'll be like all over the place. But right now, it's not even because of COVID, but it's just other reasons. It's hard to travel. I take care of my mom. So, but anyway, thank you. So until Georg, I love the keyboard, and I'm like a fan because I know how hard it is. So I searched for I guess I could just say a decade now, for like the right engineering firm. And at first I wasn't looking at engineering firms. I was just looking at maker spaces, and that it just doesn't quite actually happen. There's a lot you can get done using a maker space and just working with individual. And I found an individual who had an entire engineering setup in his backyard. It was this huge building with all the lathes and everything. And he was working for the Department of Defense, but he had all this time off. So he was helping me build vertical keyboards. We got a little bit far. I didn't really use anything he did at this point. He had to suddenly like move off to some undisclosed place and develop secret submarines. Anyway, then long story short, I found an engineer now I've been working with, and we get along so well. And I realize there's one thing I kind of want to come out and say to everyone. So I just finally got diagnosed autistic, which explains everything about my music, the way I think, the way I visualize it, all kinds of things. But I found another engineer who's autistic. So we're working like lightning speed now. So he's actually we finished the top part of the keyboard and he's doing the bottom part. And I don't know, I hope in a year there'll at least be a prototype ready. So what else?
Well, I think that's fascinating about your keyboards and the different. It's almost like when Harry Partch was seduced into carpentry, because he had to make these instruments. So many of us have had to be creative in order to just get instruments that we can play the notes we want to hear on. And one thing I've noticed about your instruments is they seem to be fixed pitch keyboards. Like the 15 tone, that's 15 tone. It's not It's not going to go into 16 tone. You have a different keyboard for 16.
Yeah, so at least with the adjustable, you'll be able to easily remove the keys. So that's something we spent a long time on to figure out how to be able to just take the key out without having to deal with a spring. Because unless you're someone that's, it's easy to take them out with the springs, but who wants to do that? If there's someone who isn't really mechanically inclined, you may not have needle nose pliers handy. So you'll be able to just lift something up, take a key out and reorder them however you want, and then put the lid back down. Like with very little screws or anything.
Yeah, that's as easy as tuning up a Fender Rhodes or something. You just open the top and do the tangs, right?
But yeah, engineering is hard. And it's almost not as much fun for me now, because when it was the actual keys and like these concepts, I was like the leader. I was like the lead engineer. But now that he's redoing the entire bottom part, I tell him what I know about like, MIDI code and MIDI, the circuit boards. I know enough to understand those are extremely simple. Like I've actually made them myself, but they're so simple. He's like, oh yeah, I already know. I could look that up.
Yeah, but maybe
he's just doing it all now.
Part of the thing of having, being on the spectrum, being diagnosed with some autism is you might have increased abilities in some areas.
Yeah, like I can see the whole keyboard three-dimensional, just like every little part. Maybe other people can do that too, but.
And
I think that. As far as that goes, I think as far as the music and autism, autistic brains have a lot more wiring for visual stuff. So you're like overly wired where other people don't have that wiring. But then other strange places, you're like separated, like you don't have other things. So like Brendan, I have a lot of music training. I had classical piano, which involved theory lessons once or twice a week from like first grade. And then all the way through grad school, really, I studied 12-tone music. Completely different part of my brain when it comes to composing music. So to me, it's interesting, but I don't, I'm sure I think about it some. Like I can't help but be aware of like, this sounds like I'm resolving down a fifth, or this sounds like modulation, like stuff like that. But I think part of the reason I like to use all kinds of different tunings and not just stick to one or two like a lot of people do. Because a lot of people, you stick to 31 or 22 or 17 or something because you really understand the theory behind it. Since I'm not going to think about any theory whatsoever when I'm tuning, it's literally just like different flavors of ice cream. And then I'm just exploring Brendan had a good term for it. I wrote it down. You just said you liked like fumbling around in the dark. I love that feeling of like fumbling around in the dark with some tuning. Like especially when I first tried 15 was easy. 15 was I can't believe I waited so long to try 15. But like 16 and 17 are good examples of that because I'm completely unfamiliar with them, just fumbling around. And then there's beautiful combinations. So it's just like this sounds like amazing brain feeling.
If you know Ivor Dornig, he had this thing where each EDO had its own mood to it. And I think that's really true. And I think he had a 17-tone banjo, and I remember he put the 17-tone on the banjo because it was not a long sustaining instrument, and he thought it's a little piquant, the harmonies, so let me do it on something more melodic where the harmonic clashes won't be as obvious on the banjo. But you're putting the 17 like Ben, Spees, you're using 17 as a compositional tool on a sustaining instrument. So how would you classify the mood of 17, 16, and 15 as differentiating from each other?
So 15, you can almost break out in like a blues thing. I don't know, it actually has chords all over the place. And 16, yeah, it's weird. I don't know. I haven't written enough 16. I've just written how many? 2 or 3 maybe at most. 16 is yellow, in case everyone was wondering. 17 is green, 19 is red, and 15 is blue. I have no idea why, but that also kind of is the mood. It's weird. The mood of the tunings reflects like the color I see in my head of them. Well, the numbers have colors. But yeah, 17 is kind of, I don't know, eerie. It's a little more tense. It's probably just because it has smaller intervals. And I don't know what's up with 18. Has anyone tried 18? That's like the one I haven't tried. Is it worth? Raise your hand if you want me to try 18.
I know.
I tried it once. I didn't like it so much.
I think people have told me that. Also 14. Yeah, 14 is another favorite of mine now. Why did I wait so long to try 14? I don't know. Problem is I got stuck in this 19 note thing for so long because it's so easy. And we also took like regular pop songs and then, did a cover in 9. I'm like, I might as well do it in 19. It's got all the notes. It's just so long. But I also used 10 at the same time. So like, let's say like a third of the Zia songs, maybe a fourth of the Zia songs were in 10 tones and the rest were in 19. And we performed from 1991 all the way to 2008. Not one person ever asked, like no one ever came up and said, are you using microtonality? Or, people would come up and say, your music is from outer space. I don't understand it. Or like, what is it about it? They'd ask me, what is it about it? But no one ever asked, like, why is it out of tune? Or is it microtonal? You'd think the 10 note per octave, that's like one of the worst tunings of all time, right? My favorite, but people don't describe it as like the ultimate tuning as far as harmonics go. But no one ever asked me.
Wow.
So I thought, well, I'm doing my job, because literally my goal in life was I'm going to write microtonal music. I can tell you about the day that started, the epiphany I had, but I'm never going to write 12 tone again as long as I live. I did cheat once. So there's one Zia album that's mostly 12 tone that I'm kind of ashamed of in the middle. But so what got me into all this was Dr. Boulanger at Berklee College of Music, and this was second to last semester or towards the end. He came into electronic music composition one day with his Max Matthews built radio baton. And he said, I'm going to perform a song in this tuning that has no octaves. You can guess where I'm going. And it was developed by John. It's called the Pierce scale. No one was calling it the Boland Pierce scale yet. It's called the Pierce scale. And here it is. And he went on to play the solemn song for evening, and he was singing it with no warning. So half the class was like chuckling, like he's singing. Ah! But my hair stood on end. I was like, what the heck? This is completely from outer space. I don't understand what's going on. This is so beautiful. I can't believe it. And it was like, it has melodic tension and release and movement and everything that normal music has, except it was completely from another planet. And I said, there's literally no reason for me to ever write 12-tone music ever again. There's so many people doing that. There's no reason for me to do it. The world doesn't need me to do that. And so that was like my declaration. It's like 1989 or 1990. And so I could try to play a little bit of that if you want me to.
Sure. Yeah, let's hear it.
I literally just learned it this morning, so this isn't anything for anyone to judge, but I thought I've been wanting to do a cover of this piece for decades. And then when Heinz Boland died, I was so disappointed. I didn't do a cover of that song I wanted to do. And then I put it off for forever. And then you guys inspired me. Someone was like, are you going to perform? I'm like, no. Well, maybe I should. Okay, so let's see. Let me get the volume right. Is this okay?
It's very good.
It's very good? Okay. So Dr. Boulanger performed this at the Berklee College of Music, the Boland Pierce Scale Symposium in 2010. So there is a video on YouTube of that. If you go to my YouTube, you'll be able to find it. I left out the whole entire middle part that I don't know yet.
Beautiful.
It goes and goes and goes. You could tell it was trying to go somewhere, and then I just kind of ended it. It goes somewhere after that, and then it goes somewhere else, and then it gets more dissonant, and he adds in, because it's really melodic and almost normal in a way, but then it goes places where it's not normal and it's dissonant, and then it comes back to that at the end. I'll never forget the first time I heard it. I was like, oh my God, I hope he comes back to that melody in the end, and then he does. And he has this this part, I think he uses the octave, the out of tune octaves. You might have noticed one of those where I'm like, oh, this. Wait. Anyway. That. It has this wonderful, terrible octave. Normally I would say stay away from that. Just like I would say stay away from fifths in 19 notes per octave. Like if you're on, don't just jam out on a fifth if you're 19. Don't just jam out on the octave. It's not an octave. But you can use it. You can use it for extreme, terrible tension. I use it a lot in Stickmen.
So, Elaine, the octaves in Bowl and Pierce, they're getting smaller as you go up. So each of the ascending octaves you just played was diminished octave.
Because that's just an anomaly. They're not really octaves in Bowl and Pierce.
Right. Is it done by ratios, or how is it figured out?
There was 3 different people that actually invented it separately without knowing about each other, and they all 3 came about it in a different way, but it was all through basically pure mathematics. So first there was Heinz Bohlen in like the mid-late 70s. He's German. He sadly passed away in, 2016. Back in the day, he was asking his friends, because he was like the engineer guy. He was engineering. He was a microwave engineer, but he was literally music engineering for his friend's band. And imagine asking a bunch of musicians off the street, why do you use 12 notes per octave? None of them are going to be able to answer you, right? So he went to the library and researched it, and he researched acoustics and all and ratios and all this stuff. And he realized it's all because of harmonic ratio series. He thought, well, maybe there could be a different kind. So he based it off odd harmonics and came up with a chord that's like 1 or 3, 5, 7. But basically, let's see if I can play it. It doesn't sound like a root chord, like a 7th chord, but it's 1, 1, 1, 5, 3, 7, 3. And then he realized, to his amazement, that you could have an equal tempered 13-tone scale that has that within it. But the frame is not an octave. It's an octave and a fifth. So it's a tritive. It didn't occur to him that musicians need octaves, literally. It didn't even occur to him. So he developed this whole tuning, published it. He built a keyboard, and I used to stare at his keyboard trying to figure out what it was. And anyway, and then John R. Pierce, who is a famous microwave engineer. They're both microwave engineers. Go figure. He invented the same thing with Max Matthews, who's the father of computer music, and there were some other people involved. But they published their findings in 1984 and called it the 3579B scale. So the 357 is, that chord. I don't know what the B stands for. Someone should look that up. And later, they realized someone else had actually published the same exact tuning, slightly different mathematical reasons. So I'm not really as familiar with how John Pierce came up with it, but I think it was a different angle mathematically. And so when I heard about it in late 80s, early 90s, it was called the Pierce scale. And I remember bugging Dr. Boulanger, we should call it the Bohlen Pierce scale. So anyway, on the Wikipedia page, it just says John Pierce changed the name to Bohlen Pierce scale when he found out. I think it took a lot of nagging. Anyway, there was someone in between who also invented it, and he's still on Facebook. You guys can be friends with him. Kees von Prugen. I'll never know how to pronounce his name. He's a computer artist, and he He invented it. He came up with it again in a slightly different mathematical way. But so just mathematically, it's very, very pure as far as ratios. There's a large number of intervals that line up nicely. In fact, it's almost like the string patch, for some reason, you think wouldn't really lend itself to it because it's odd harmonics are the ones that are, really involved in the making of the tuning are all odd harmonics. So a lot of people use clarinets and odd harmonic instruments, square waves, for example. For some reason, the string patch, though, even though it has all harmonics, seems to just lend itself nicely to just playing random. It just sounds alien. And I've even had students, I taught electronic music for 10 years. So I had a couple students that were kind of handicapped, and one of them couldn't use his hands. He literally just could go like this. And so they all had to do a composition. So I gave him a string patch on the Bowl and Pierce scale. And I also had a lot of students that weren't musicians at all. Like it was required for the dancers and other people. A lot of people took it that were training to be music engineers, like sound recording. But they just kind of wanted to learn music a little bit. And they wanted to learn about synthesizers and stuff like that. So I really encouraged a lot of them to use the Bowl and Pierce scale because you can literally play random notes and it sounds good. And I just said, you have to 2/3 of the way through the song, have a golden section and then come back and like do patterns and then copy and paste. And he wrote this amazing piece. Which I also wanted to do a cover of it.
The golden section being the golden ratio point in the piece.
Yeah. That was my only rule ever for composition.
Wow.
You have to have, if it was a pop song, so if they wrote it pop song style, like verse, bridge, chorus, breakdown, chorus, or whatever, you could never have two sections exactly the same. They always had to add a line when they got to the next verse or something always had to change. But in general, always just had to have a golden section. So 2/3 of the way through, do something different. It could be one note. It could be that you have silence for a moment, or it could be like a whole new section or a new instrument or something.
Yeah, that's interesting. And the keyboard, you were playing a generalized keyboard just for that piece. What is that?
So this is called a sonome is the generic name. Like if you're going to say tissue instead of Kleenex, this is a sonome style keyboard. This particular company, See Through Music, they developed this particular model. The man who invented it, Peter Davies, he lives in England, and he was with See Through Music because he was the inventor. And then they broke apart, and he got his own company, The Sound of Music. He started making bigger, fancier ones with actual guitar paint. So some of you guys will appreciate that. He actually would make the frame out of wood and have fancy custom guitar paint. And this company shrank them down and made them just more plastic. Like I got the nice metal one I like. They shrank it down and made it all plastic, and a better price range would be like $550 for a tiny version of this. So it was, both companies, was impossible for them to get the right price range. It was either too small, but they did sell quite a bit of, we bought a few for my classroom of the small ones. And then the big fancy one with wood and guitar paint, they were like $3,000. So that wasn't good either. And they both went out of business. But Peter will give me all his parts and plans. If I ever get this thing done, then I'll try to make a new one of these. There's a lot of other hexagon keyboards that are popular already, that are already being made. They don't have this layout that I really like, though. The hexagons are just laid out a little differently. So the world doesn't have to have this. There's already stuff out there, but
yeah,
if I have the time and money, I'll do it.
It's almost too bad that there's not a standard for people who want to get something, but it's still in that growing stage. But one thing I wanted to get to about your music was, and you mentioned it a couple times even today, is space and aliens and that element of it. If you were going to jam with an alien, what kind of tuning system is he going to be using? Is he going to be using 12-tone? I'm not sure if they have the technology to come here. He's still stuck in 12-tone. I'm not sure. What do you think?
And I don't necessarily think aliens are going to be using, the adjustable tunings that people dynamic tunings where it's like always in tune no matter what you play. I don't think that's going to be it either, because I think aliens will understand that consonance and dissonance are equally important, just like silence and sound or whatever. Mm-hmm. I think aliens will probably use a whole bunch of different tunings, and they'll have a keyboard that's, you know, more sophisticated than mine or anything else. You know, probably holographic or something. We'll just be mind melding music. But I think they'll use a variety, and they'll just realize there's a variety of different tunings you can use. They'll be using any and all of the above. Just like in mathematics, there's so many different types of mathematics that people use, like, what field are you in? What field of math are you in? They all are important and usable. So anyone who's a mathematician understands, well, commutative algebra is just as important as topology or whatever. Aliens will be like that too.
Right. So if you were going to jam with an alien, which tuning system of yours would you?
I think I would try to use Bowl and Pierce just to see if they could keep up.
Throw them a little curveball with the octave.
It's probably good. I'm not that great at it.
Well, that's cool. All right. And
you know, do I have any time left?
Go ahead.
There were so many things I wrote down when other people were talking that gosh.
Well, we'll have a question and answer thing at the end of the session.
Okay.
Unless there's something you wanted to throw in now.
I think I'm good. Well, I think as far as, so something David said in some random interview just really struck me. There are a few things, but I wrote one of them down. Just that what tuning system you use. Oh, this is brilliant. I'm just going to quote, "The influence of the tuning system is underestimated by a lot of musicians, but overestimated by theorists that specialize in tuning systems." So you remember saying that, David?
Yes, I do actually.
There you are. I just thought it was so brilliant. I'm like, and then you went on to say, "The expression and interpretation of emotions in music never come from a single source or branch of theory. Tuning alone is as powerful as rhythm, dynamics, or timbre by itself. Very powerful, but nothing compared to the combination of them all. And the content of the media and people." Yeah, there's just so many different things. So it's not what tuning are you using.
So you just wrote that down.
I copied and pasted.
Down as, really? Was that written?
That wasn't, it was something like 12 questions or something. I didn't write down where it came from.
I know now. Okay. Okay, yes.
I wasn't as familiar with you, and I wanted to learn kind of how you were thinking, and I'm like, wow, this is amazing. Yeah, you talked about consonance and dissonance too. That's another thing of mine. Yeah, because there's, you know, you think consonance and dissonance is just beating, you know, a lot of people, but of course it's, you know, it's more than that. When you look at the whole picture, there's so much subjective nature to what is consonant and dissonant. There was this huge study done at Florida Atlantic University not that long ago, and they actually it's a lot of it's about chaos theory and how your brain interprets pitches, and it's a lot more than just beating. So that's one definition that's valid. That's beating. That's valid definition. But if you're looking at more of a subjective, then you're interviewing people and then taking brain scans. It has to do with a different thing where it funnels it in, and it has to do with a lot of different subjective things. So that's another reason that kind of validated it for me, why, you know, I can just go through all these different equal temperaments that are probably horrible and make music with them and not worry about it. I don't worry about what timbre I'm using.
Yeah.
So anyway.
I agree completely. Consonance and dissonance are just very complex concepts that cannot really have an absolute definition. But if you're going for a measure of consonance and dissonance, beating is one way, one place to start, I think. But
that's the main place, obviously.
Yeah, of course. But then, of course, the experience of the listener is the main drive of what he perceives as consonant or dissonant, of course. And also
it's more the content. Like the movement, the dynamic over time, like the time dynamic of it, how one thing leads to another.
Of course. Yeah.
And I don't tend to go.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, I don't tend to compose vertically that much with chords. So I try to sometimes to be clever, but usually it's more like Bach, where you have like lines. And I know Dr. B does the same thing, especially now that I'm learning his piece, I'm remembering. Yeah, he does one note at a time, 2 notes at a time, and then fills in. So it's more about the movement over time and how it pulls you as opposed to like, boom, here's a chord that's in tune. But to me, it can sound kind of flat if it's too much in tune. Oh. Okay.
Interesting. Well, I think that alien question is great, and I think that some of the Zia music that I heard addressed, some of that connection.
And now I'm validated that I am from a different planet. Being autistic, they call it the wrong planet syndrome. It all makes sense.
Yeah, and the thing the government did in June, of releasing some information with hundreds of testimonies from pilots and film and it's still not all out yet. It's still in dribs and drabs coming out. Just a last question, have you had any experience yourself interacting with...
I'm really upset about it. I really want to meet... I'm kind of upset that I always thought the gray aliens were my friends, and everyone's like, no, they're just they're just robots, they're just blah, genetically manufactured with no thought process. Like, oh, darn.
If we're lucky, we're not too old to maybe see something in our lifetime. You never know, and I still keep the hope up that we'll have interactions with...
I'm signed up with Alcor to be frozen in liquid nitrogen when I get paused so that I can see the future and, of course, follow Elon Musk and all that stuff.
Yeah, well, you want to freeze some of those instruments and make sure they're, available when you wake up.
Freeze my instruments, yeah.
Yeah, so you can. But thank you so much, Elaine, and I really respect the work you've done for a long time, and you're still going, and instrument creation and everything, and the music's beautiful, so thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.